And good afternoon. How is everybody? Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are going to be talking about listening. Wow. What does that look like? I talked about listening a few weeks ago, and today I'm going to be talking about the integrity of listening. Huh? What'd you say? I wasn't really listening. I was like looking at the squirrel outside the window. And gosh, I'm kind of hungry. I'm thinking a little bit about food. And, wow. The camera's not quite right. So, I'm not really paying attention. My question is this. How do you listen? How do you pay attention? Well, last night I had the pleasure, and I'm going to put somebody on here. I had the pleasure of talking to Bob Davis with Bob Davis Podcasts. And as you can see, he has an amazing show. This is his copy of his website. Look him up on Bob Davis. And you can see he has several people that sponsor him. And his podcasts are live topics. In fact, he drove a vehicle, which isn't on this particular picture. He drove his podcast vehicle all the way down to the wall in Mexico, really enjoyed it. And he was in Iowa at the caucuses in February, and he goes live and he talks and does the research necessary, and he listens on the ground to the people and does podcasts about it and talks about it. And as we were in conversation, I started to see how I listen to social media and judge and assess. And I started to think about how I listen in my relationship with my wife and how I listen inside my relationships with my clients. And I was asking him, how do you validate some of the things you hear or see on social media? And he said, well, there are rules of evidence. And I'll do my best to quote Bob Davis on this. These rules of evidence are A, is it admissible? Or is it just hearsay? B, is it believable because Joseph was actually in the building when it happened? He was standing right there. And C, were there any witnesses, eyewitnesses, people that can corroborate the story that aren't fictional? So I started to look at and listen to my own internal conversation of how do I listen to social media, and started to just think all these things. What is listening? What does listening look like when I'm in a conversation with somebody that's telling me about their point of view? And yesterday I talked a little bit about point of view and friendship. And today I wanted to spend a little bit of time really delving into how do we listen? Well, we listen through filters of our life. What do I mean by that? Well, we don't hear actually what somebody's saying. We hear our interpretation of what they're saying based on the number of times we've said it. In fact, the other day I talked about somebody that says red, they hear blue. And somebody says blue and they hear red. Well, that's based on the fact that when we heard red before, we interpreted blue, and it never got exchanged in our mind and in our head. And what I wanted to look at in this video today was, how are you listening? Let's take the case of a conversation I had this morning. I was listening to a client that was talking about having a conversation with his wife, and how in that conversation he would get triggered. She would say something, he would experience it, get frustrated, and take himself away from that conversation. And she would then interpret him as not being sensitive, not paying attention, not listening. when in fact, what had happened was he got triggered and moved, and literally his attention went away because he got hooked on his own story, and it got in the way. And the conversation became, so Les, how do I get out of that? What is there some techniques and tips that I can do to make sure that I come back to the listening? I let the person know that, that so they don't get upset that I'm not listening. And here's a couple of tips that I want you to try with your significant other or with people that you work with. One, when you're listening and they say something and they trigger something, say, hold on just a second. What you just said reminded me of something of a time when I got really upset about something. And I just want to say that so that I can set it outside of this conversation. Because I'm not listening the way I was listening a minute ago. Now, that's being authentic. It's being in communication. It's letting somebody know that you did not, in that moment, give them 100% of your attention. You got interrupted. The difference is now you acknowledge it so that it doesn't look like you just vanished and they're talking to a wall. It's being vulnerable and being transparent. Then you can come back into the conversation and re-engage. Now, they may go, well, what happened to you? What did you get triggered by? And you could say, look, here's what happened to me, and here's what showed up, and here's what I did about it. And in sharing about that particular thing, it might support the person that's sharing with you about their upset. Therefore, now you're on the same court, and in sharing back and forth, it gives a new sense of listening and vulnerability because there's a real person over there that's listening to me, that's paying attention, that really is engaged in what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. That's integrity of listening. It's being responsible for the other person's view of how you're listening. Now, one of the other tips is to actually say, hold on a second. What you just said to me, here's how I interpreted it. Let me repeat it back to you because I really want to make sure that I'm getting what you want to communicate to me. Whether it's an instruction, whether it's an upset that they have, and say it back, not in a smart-ass way, but in a way that says, look, I'm listening and paying attention to you. And I want to make sure because I don't want to miss this. And I think it's pertinent, and I may have not caught what you said exactly the right way you wanted me to hear it. In that, we're sharing with the person and developing a relationship of how we're listening. If we flip to a business environment and you're leading a conversation at the front of a room and you say something, one of the things that you can do is check in with your audience. You can say, I just want to check in at the table here because this is a very important topic and I'd like to see how you're hearing what I'm saying. And then listen for feedback. It's very important because then you can adjust as the speaker how you're speaking to them. If your speaking is too fast, too slow, too vague, not descriptive enough, not engaged enough, too ethereal. This is really a fun skill to learn. It's really amazing to have active listening, is what this is called, where it becomes play back and forth and really paying attention to the details. Well, thanks for listening to me today. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. God bless.
Coaching with Les has doubled my practice.
If you have any struggles in your business or your personal life, Les is your guy.
He's logical, he's empathetic, He has passion for helping people, and his ideas are genuinely thoughtful.
So if you're looking for a business coach with integrity, choose Les Hill.